It's Wednesday night, and we are in a study on the history of Israel. We're going to go through the Bible, and we want you to understand what the Bible's about. I do not believe that people need 3 points, a poem, and a couple of jokes. That's what they teach you if you go to seminary in hermeneutics class. Hermes was the interpreter of the gods in Greece, and so they named interpreting the scripture after him, and I don't know why they did that, but they'll tell you, you need something simple that people can latch on to and that they won't forget. Well, you see, I believe that if you teach all the Bible, people will remember it because it is a continuous story of a family that started with Adam. And we see that family in Genesis 5. Genesis 5, and Adam and his family go all the way down to Noah, and Noah is the 10th grandson. If you say Adam's great, 10 times, Noah was Adam's 10th great grandson. And then Noah's son, Shem, he carries on this family tradition, this lineage. The seed of Adam is in Shem. Get the word Semitic from that. And Semitic is Jewish. And Shem's son Arphaxad, and he takes it all the way down to Abraham. Abraham is the 20th great. And that is not to say that in these lineages there wasn't certain people left out. To be a great-grandson or a great-grandson, they would go ahead and call that person a son of a man back here. Mr. Archer said there could have been thousands of years from Adam down here to Noah, but God only numbers things the way he wants them to be counted, and I'm not going to get into that right now. I'll read some from Mr. Archer's book. If you want to get a good book by a brilliant man, and I don't recommend a lot of people, but Gleason Archer's book, Introduction to the Old Testament, is a really magnificent book, and you can get that. Anyway, this takes us all down to Abraham, Isaac, and then Jacob, and Jacob's name is changed to Israel. So, actually, Adam is Israel. I don't think I ever said that. Adam is Israel. This is nothing but his sperm, his seed in all these generations, all the way to Israel. And Israel has 12 sons, and those 12 sons become the nation, and they all have a tribe, and they were divided up just like Joshua divided them up here. And when Joshua led the children of Israel back to the land, he divided this according to the instruction of God: Simeon's land, Judah's land, Reuben, Gad, Benjamin, Ephraim, Dan. Manasseh had all this, and I don't know why God did that. It's probably more wasteland up here. And then Issachar, Zebulun, Asher, Naphtali, and so forth. These are the sons of Jacob, where they settled in, and we'll get into that when we study the book of Joshua. Now, we've gone, what we're doing, we've gone through the book of Genesis, and we've ended up with Joseph. All of this is the book of Genesis. From Adam all the way to Joseph, that's the book of Genesis. And then you go into the book of Exodus. Exodus is where we are. The children of Israel are put into bondage in the first chapter. In the second chapter, Moses is born. In the third chapter, Moses is called by God to go to Pharaoh. Called by God in the third chapter to go to Pharaoh and say, "Let my people go." And he goes to him in the fourth chapter. And finally, God says he's going to send 10 plagues upon Egypt, and he's going to harden Pharaoh's heart. But when the 10th one gets here, that will be the death of the firstborn. Firstborn, and that will be the Passover. And then they will leave Egypt. Joseph was sold into Egypt. Of course, if this is the Mediterranean Sea and here is Egypt, and here's Israel over here. So Joseph was sold to an Ishmaelite caravan that was going over to Egypt, and he was in bonds in Egypt. And then he rose to second only to Pharaoh in Egypt. We know the story. I'm not going to go through that again. Then they come out of Egypt. He crosses the Red Sea, and he goes to Mount Sinai. Now, I put Mount Sinai down here in the southern Sinai Peninsula. We do not know exactly. I gave you a map. We don't know exactly where these places are. They know approximately where some of them are. But where we've gone, we left Egypt, and in the 14th chapter they leave Egypt in the 12th chapter. God gives them special instruction in the 13th chapter, and in the 14th chapter they cross the Red Sea, and they go into the wilderness. The 14th chapter, as they're crossing the Red Sea, God has an east wind to come and open the Red Sea, and then Pharaoh and his armies go down into the Red Sea, and God reaches down with some magnificent, perhaps the death angel Michael goes in there, and God says he pulls their chariot wheels off their chariots, and they would drive heavily then. They couldn't drive their chariots because they didn't have any wheels. God killed Pharaoh and his armies, and the God that killed Pharaoh was Jesus, because Jesus is the God of the Old Testament. He is the I am. He said he was before Abraham. He said before Abraham was, I am. And we went through a lot of this last week, how this is why a lot of people don't like the God of the Old Testament. The God of the Old Testament is the same as the God of the New Testament. The God of the New Testament is Jesus and also his Father. You have to keep everything in context. When the Bible says no man has seen God at any time in John the 1st chapter, we've seen Jesus and he's God. He said before Abraham was, I am. And when Moses said, well, if I go to Israel in Egypt and tell them that I'm going to lead them out of Egypt, what if they say, who is this God? What is his name? He said, you tell them I am has sent me. So when Jesus says, before Abraham was, I am, the Pharisees said, we'll kill you for calling yourself God. I heard Kenneth Copeland say several times, Jesus never called himself God. Well, he called himself the I am. He certainly did. And he referred to himself as God every time he would say, I am the bread of life. I am the door of the sheepfold. I am. He had all these I ams all through the Scripture. Now, where we are, we've come over to the 15th chapter is 14th chapter, they leave Egypt. God kills Pharaoh and his armies in 14. 15 is the Song of Moses. That is Israel praising God for killing, Israel praising the God of the Old Testament, who is Jesus pre-incarnate. They're praising God for killing Pharaoh. Now, people say, God wouldn't kill people and make people sick. Well, yes, he will. Where'd you ever come up with that? He says, look here. This is Jesus. Jesus is the God of the Old Testament. Look over here in Deuteronomy 32. Look at this. Deuteronomy 32. Just to make sure we know who we're dealing with. 32. And look here in verse 39. See now that I, even I, am he, and there is no God with me. This is Jesus, before he was called Jesus. I kill. I make alive. I wound. If a man is wounded, I wounded him. If he's healed, I heal him, but I don't heal by faith healing. Faith healing is a lie. Every time the Bible says thy faith is made thee whole, the word whole is the word sozo. It means saved. God doesn't heal by our faith. He's already declared the end from the beginning, and from ancient times, from long before the beginning, from ancient times, everything, here we are right here, everything that's not yet done, he says, I've declared, and my counsel shall stand, and I'll do all the things that I'm pleased to do. I'll do all my pleasure. So if you get a ticket tomorrow, that's the will of God. When I knocked those papers off a while ago, that's the will of God. When you spill something, that's the will of God. You break the load, that's the will of God. When you get fired, that's the will of God. When you get well, that's the will of God. When you die from a sickness, that's the will of God. He's got everything appointed. He says, I've determined the times before appointed. The timing of everything is already appointed there in Acts 17:26. He said, I've determined the timing of everything appointed in the bounds of their habitation. He calls timing there. He says, the habitation of all timing I've declared. And it's already done in the mind of God. Well, Jim, don't we have free will? It seems like we have free will. Well, you can will to go outside, and you can will to go up here and turn right or left. And the rest of your life will hinge on whether you turn right or left. And if you go down the road and you have a car wreck, you end up in the hospital, and somebody comes in there and says, this is the will of God, and you say, yes, it's the will of God, not without the right turn. Not without every situation that happens. We just think because God put us in these bodies that can make decisions that we have precluded all the decisions that God has made from the foundation of the world. He's made all the decisions, and it's really hard to get a hold of that God will make a decision. He put man in a body that had to sin, and then he held him accountable for it. He made Adam out of the corrupt dust of the ground, and then he says, thou shalt not, and when you do, I'm going to whip you. We think that's really bad. We think that's not right to create a man in a body that would break the law of God and then hold him accountable. Well, do you think it's okay for you to get together with your wife and plan to have a baby, and you know when it's in the flesh that it's going to sin, and then you're going to correct it when it sins and when it transgresses against you? Do you think that's okay? Well, why is it okay for you and it's not okay for God? Huh? That's exactly the same thing. Well, let's have a baby, honey. Okay, we're going to make it behave, and it's going to be rebellious because babies are that way, children are that way, and we'll spank it, make it go to bed, and we'll make it eat its vegetables, and we'll go take it to the doctor, to have a mean old doctor give it a shot of some kind for its sicknesses, and we'll give it aspirin and things, and we'll make it behave. Well, why? You think that's unfair? People think it's unfair for God to have his family and birth them according to his will, and then hold us accountable for it. Put us in bodies that can't keep from sinning. No different than when you have a child. And then you're going to hold it accountable. Is that any different? Somebody show me any difference in that. Not any. Oh, it's all right if we do that. It's just all right if God does that. It's okay for me to do what I want, but it's not okay for God to do what he wants. All right. Then he says, I kill, I make alive, I wound, I heal. Neither is there any that can deliver out of my hand when I get ready to kill you, or I get ready to make you alive, or make you sick, or make you well. And look over here in 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel, the 2nd chapter. This is the prayer of Hannah, the mother of Samuel, the writer of this book. This is Hannah's prayer. And Hannah prayed. She said to God in the 1st chapter, verse 11, she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look on mine affliction of thine handmaid. Her affliction was that she was barren. And her wife-in-law, see, Elkanah was Samuel's father. Elkanah had another wife, Peninnah. Peninnah had all kinds of babies. Boy, she had one right after another. And Hannah, who was Elkanah's beloved wife, he loved her, just like Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah. He loved Hannah. And she began to pray, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look on mine affliction of thine handmaid and remember me, if you'll remember me and not forget thine handmaid, and will give unto thine handmaid a man-child, then I will give him unto the Lord all the days of my life. She did not pray for a child. She said, if you'll give me one, I'll give him to you for service. And there shall no razor come upon his head. And that was the vow of a Nazarite. So Samuel was a Nazarite. So was John the Baptist. So was Samson. They're all Nazarites. Their hair was never cut. That's why Samson lost his strength, not because somebody cut his hair, because he broke his vow. And then after Samuel's born, Hannah prays the prayer, Verse 27 of the first chapter, for this child I prayed, and the Lord hath given me my petition. The petition didn't mean she was asking. She said, here's my petition. If you want me to have the child, I'll give him back to you, which I ask of him. Therefore also I have lent him to the Lord. Lent him. I've given him over to the Lord. As long as he liveth, he shall be lent to the Lord, and he worshiped the Lord there. In chapter 2, verse 1, Hannah prayed and said, my heart rejoiceth in the Lord, mine horn. A horn was power. My power with God, or my power in the fact that you gave me Samuel, is exalted in the Lord. My strength is exalted in the Lord. That's what a horn was. There were 4 horns that carried Israel into captivity there in the last couple of verses of the first chapter of Zechariah. That was Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome. So a horn meant strength or power. My mouth is engaged over mine enemies, because I rejoice in thy salvation. She's talking about Peninnah, her wife-in-law. Boy, she didn't like Peninnah. Peninnah didn't like her, because she knew that Elkanah loved Hannah more than he loved her. There is none holy as the Lord, for there is none beside thee, neither is there any rock. We talked about the rock was Jesus when Moses smote the rock in the wilderness, and when he wasn't supposed to smite the rock, he was supposed to speak to the rock in that 21st chapter of Numbers. We talked about that one week. There's no rock but God. And that rock in the wilderness was a type of Christ. That's what the 10th chapter of 1 Corinthians says. Talk no more so exceeding proudly. Let not arrogancy come out of your mouth, for the Lord, this is all Hannah's prayer. The Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty men are broken by God. That's what Hannah says. You can't overcome God. And they that stumble are girded with strength. They that were full have hired out themselves for bread, and they that were hungry ceased. So that the barren hath borne 7, and she that hath many children is waxed feeble. She's saying that the barren are the ones that's going to be blessed by God and is going to have more children than the one that seems to be having it together. But the one that is feeble, waxing feeble, that's the one that doesn't believe God. Then these are Hannah's words. The Lord killeth. People say God won't kill people. Jesus kills people. The Lord killeth and makes alive. The word, remember the word quicken? Z-O-O-P-O-I-E-O. Make alive. Quicken means to make alive, and the scripture says in John 5:21 that Jesus quickens whom he wills. If you come alive in Christ, it's because he does it. And it's not your will, it's his will. He kills, he makes alive, he brings down to the grave. If anybody dies and goes to the grave, it's God that does it. And he bringeth up from the grave. If anybody's resurrected spiritually or literally. If he's resurrected, if Lazarus is resurrected, if the child that Elisha lay upon is resurrected, if the child that Elijah lay upon is resurrected, it's God that does it. The Lord makes poor. Whenever a person's poor, God made them that way. And we do not look down on the poor. We do, those of us that have capabilities of doing better, and we've got an astute ability in business, we're supposed to help the poor believers. And I mention them every time we get together. And God makes a man rich. But if you're rich, what are you supposed to do? You're to use it for the glory of God, support his work. God brings low. If a man is low, God makes him that way. Remember, the scripture says over in Daniel, the 4th chapter, that God gives the kingdoms of this world to whomsoever he will, and places over it the basis of men. That word basis means low down. So if a man is low down, and he's a big name president or all presidents are big name, aren't they? They're all the lowest of men. All governors are the lowest of men. They're all power hungry, money hungry, and that's what they want. He hath set the world upon them. Well, I've missed some of this. He raises up the poor out of the dust and lifts up the beggar from the dunghill. If God brings you up out of filth, and a dunghill was a Jewish term for pagan temples. So if he brings you up out of a literal dunghill or out of a pagan temple, to set them among princes, if a person is lifted up high from nowhere and he comes from nothing to something, that's God that did it, whether it's an evil, wicked man or whether it's a righteous man, whether it's an Abraham with all these servants in his household or Job with all of his wealth, or whether it's an evil, wicked man with lots of money and he hates God because he hates the truth. And to make them inherit the throne of glory, for the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and he has set the world upon them. He will keep the feet of his saints. He'll take care of us, hedge us about, guard us, and protect us. The word is shamar, keep, S-H-A-M-A-R. It would be a word that is equivalent to the New Testament word, tereo, keeping his commandments, guarding his commandments against loss. He will keep the feet of his saints, and the wicked shall be silent in darkness, and by strength shall no man prevail. Men are not going to prevail because they're stronger than others. The Bible says the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong. Time and chance happeneth unto them all. Chance is not our word chance. It's the word pagah. It means intercession. God intercedes where he wants to. He kills who he wants to. He stops who he wants to. He starts who he wants to. He raises up men, causes them to start and causes them to go, and he causes them to stop. This is God's computer program that we're living. We're living out a movie. We're living out, God is the writer, the director, and it's all of time. I saw a serial killer on TV the other night. He said, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I can't do anything else but this. He said, this is like a program. It's already been scripted. I thought, wow. He knows that he's doing the will of God by doing his evil. And then God will judge him one day. So by strength shall no man prevail. Nobody prevails by their strength. It's just like the rabbit, the hare, and the tortoise. When the hare sits down and loafs, and the tortoise slowly crawls by him and wins the race, that's God says we'll reap a reward in due time if we don't relax like the hare. Now let's go back over here to, so God is the one that kills. He ordains everything to be. So as we study the Old Testament and we study the God of the Old Testament, we're going to be studying the God of the Old Testament, who is Jesus. I need to prove some more of that. Let me go over here to Isaiah 54. Isaiah 54. This is one of my favorite verses concerning Jesus being God. I love this. Isaiah 54. Now this is Isaiah speaking to Israel. Look at verse 5. For thy maker is thine husband, Israel. Well, who's the maker of all things? John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. The Word was God. And all things were made by Him. Him is a pronoun referring back to the Word. All things were made by the Word, and without Him was not anything made that was made. In fact, over there in Colossians, the first chapter, look at Colossians, the first chapter. Colossians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. All right. Look here in Colossians, the first chapter. Speaking of Christ, in verse 16, for by Him were all things created. This is Christ. It's talking about us being translated in the kingdom of His dear Son, in whom we have redemption. Verse 14, His dear Son, who is the image of the invisible God. That's His dear Son. The firstborn of every creature, His dear Son. For by His dear Son, Him, are all things created that are in heaven and that are in the earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by him and for him. So, Jesus is married to Israel, isn't he? According to that 54th chapter of Isaiah. And he is before all things, and by him all things consist, and he is the head of the body, the church. And that's Christ, isn't it? We'll look over here in Revelation. Revelation, the 4th chapter. Revelation 4. And this is just a few verses here. Revelation 4. These are the 24 elders of the 24 sons of Ithamar and Eleazar that cast their crowns before Jesus, who sits upon the throne. And these words are said unto him, Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for thou hast created all things. And for thy pleasure they are and were created. Now back over here to Isaiah 54. Isaiah 54. Israel, for thy maker is thine husband. Well, who is the husband of the church? Isn't that Christ? Isn't the church the wife of Christ? Well, does that mean he's got two wives? No, that means we are of the same body as Israel in the 3rd chapter of Ephesians. We're fellow citizens of the household of God there in the 2nd chapter of Ephesians. We were aliens from the commonwealth of Israel. Now we're fellow citizens. So Israel, Old Testament Israel, the believers of Old Testament Israel were spiritual, and we're spiritual Israel, and we're the wife of Christ. So you go back over here to the 54th chapter of Isaiah. Thy maker is thine husband, and who made all things? Jesus. The Lord of hosts is his name. And thy Redeemer. Well, who's the Redeemer? Isn't that Christ? And the Holy One of Israel. All of these are the same thing. The Maker is the husband. The Lord of hosts is the Maker. The Redeemer is the Maker. The Holy One of Israel is the Maker. And the Holy One of Israel is called the God of the whole earth. So all of these are the same. Maker, Lord of hosts, Redeemer, Holy One of Israel is God. We'll look over here at Acts 3. Acts 3, and Peter and John are preaching to the Pharisees. Acts 3. In verse 11. And as the lame man who had been lame from his mother's womb, in verse 2, and Peter and John had said, Take up thy bed and walk. And as the lame man which was healed held Peter and John, all the people ran together unto them in the porch that is called Solomon. Solomon's porch was right on the front of the temple, like so. And the temple was nothing but a reproduction of the tabernacle over there. Solomon's porch was out here. And those gates were right there that went into the temple. Here's the temple, the Ark of the Covenant. 7 candlesticks, tables show bread, and the altar of incense. Now, where was I? Holy One, okay, he says, and the God of Abraham, where did I leave off? 11. And as the lame man which was healed held Peter and John, all the people ran together into the porch that is called Solomon's, greatly wondering. And when Peter saw it, he answered unto the people, Ye men of Israel, why marvel ye at this healing, when we raised this man from the dead? And the healing, or raised this man from his sick bed, the healings were to prove who they were, and the healings proved who Jesus was there in Acts 2:22. And why look ye so earnestly on us, as though by our own power or holiness we had made this man to walk? And the God of Abraham, and Isaac, and Jacob. Now Peter's standing here preaching. We're still at Pentecost. This is the time of Pentecost. We're still in the feast of Pentecost. And the God of our fathers hath glorified his Son Jesus. He's talking to all of these people here in heteroglossa, other foreign languages, right? because they couldn't understand him, because they were Jews from every nation under heaven. We went through this in our series on tongues. Whom ye delivered and denied him in the presence of Pilate. He's talking to all these Jews there at Jerusalem at Pentecost, speaking in a heteroglossa, other foreign languages, other tongues, and they were hearing in their dialectos, their dialect, their tongue wherein they were born. When he was determined to let him go, Pilate wanted to let him go, but you wouldn't let him go. You said you was going to report Pilate to Caesar. But you denied the Holy One. He's talking to the Pharisees. You denied the Holy One and the just. He's talking about Jesus, isn't he? You denied the Holy One and the just and desired a murder to be granted unto you. You killed the Prince of Life, whom God hath raised from the dead, whereof we are witnesses. Then you go back over here to Isaiah 54. Your Maker is your husband. He's the Redeemer. That's Christ. Your Maker is the Holy One, and he's called the God of the earth. So the God of the Old Testament is Jesus before he's called Jesus. Isn't that right? Now, let's go back over here to, I was going somewhere. Let's go back over here to in the 16th chapter. I want to teach you something here. Here's how you remember some things. Remember the central point of chapters. Don't try to memorize everything in a chapter. If you do that, you'll get confused and you won't remember it. Remember the 14th chapter of the leaving Egypt. 14th chapter of leaving Egypt, 14. We know that the 12th chapter is the first Passover, when God kills all the firstborn in Egypt that don't have the blood over the doorpost. And the reason the Egyptians are going to die is they're not told this secret. God doesn't love the Egyptians, does he? He's going to kill all those firstborns. They haven't had a warning. Oh, be sure and put blood over the doorpost, the lamb without blemish, you bunch of Egyptians. They're not even told that. The blood of Christ wasn't given to the vessels of wrath fitted to destruction. It was given to his church. The church is his wife. That's Israel. We're spiritual Israel. So the Egyptians didn't have a chance. God tells Moses, you tell Pharaoh, let my son go. Israel is my son, even my firstborn. If you don't let my son go, I'm going to kill your firstborn son. Moses, I'm going to harden his heart so he won't let the people go. Well, what kind of a chance was there with Pharaoh's son? None. Remember, the 12th chapter is the Passover, and they leave the next morning in the 12th chapter. The 13th chapter is preparation for the firstborns that were spared. They're going to be set aside and sanctified. The 14th chapter is Red Sea experience. Pharaoh's armies got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. They're dead in the 14th chapter. Just sing that little song at 14. 15 is the Song of Moses, praising God for killing him. 16th chapter, remember this. There's a couple of things that happen in the 16th chapter. Remember, the children of Israel are in the wilderness, about 2.5 million of them, and they're hungry. 16th chapter is the manna chapter. Manna. Remember that. That's where God says, I'll give you bread from heaven. And Jesus said in the 6th chapter of John, he was the bread from heaven. Remember that? Now, it takes a long time to catch all this stuff. Now, in the 16th chapter, he's talking about manna for 6 days, take enough for the 7th day. On the 6th day, if you take too much on the days of the week and save it till the morning, it'll be rotten and full of worms. But on the 6th day, take enough for 2 days, and it won't rot and it won't have worms in it. I guess that's another miracle from God. You reckon? I think so. And then Moses tell him about the manna there. And then you get to the 17th chapter, chapter 17. This is the first rock water experience. Rock water. Water out of a rock. Well, you got 2.5 million people there. I think they need something to drink, don't they? He gives them food here and gives them drink here. Now, with 2.5 million people, you've got to have a great, big, huge rock. It's got to be a river flowing because most of the water is going to seep into the ground, going to flow away. It's got to be flowing for quite a long time. Where's that water coming from? Ask God. I don't know. You mean enough water for the Mississippi River to flow out there so that a lot of it can flow into the desert, sink into the desert, and then they're over there. Who knows how big it was gushing? Had to be big, too, for that. In fact, I've got that paper about Israel going to the wilderness. I read it, but I'll just read this part about the water. Oh, yes, they would have to have water. These 2 million people, if they only had enough to drink and wash a few dishes, it would take 11 million gallons each day and a freight train with tank cars 1,800 miles long just to bring water to them. But the water didn't come. They didn't just get the water they needed. It flowed out of the rock and sunk into the sand and flowed away into some arroyo, and they had more water than what he has on this paper. And this was a study that done by some scientific research. All right. Now, when you get into the 17th chapter, they have their first rock experience. God tells Moses, you smite the rock in the 6th verse for water. Now, when we get Moses up to Numbers, the 20th chapter, and the people of Israel are murmuring, God says, speak to the rock. And the people are murmuring so incessantly, just griping and, wait, I think it sounds like Christians in America. Why am I having all these trials, these problems, these tribulations? If God loves me, why would he do this to me? Why would he put me out here and have all these trials in this wilderness out here, and I'm having a hard time? Now, everybody, we've got so many people here having a hard time. If you think you're having a hard time, I can tell you some stories about people here, and you'll feel ashamed of yourself. We ought to be ashamed. How many times did the Lord tell us, stop your murmuring all through the New Testament, over and over and over? Quit murmuring. You know why you're supposed to quit murmuring? Because God has planned your life. If God would stick his head out of the sky and say, hey, I'm doing this, don't yell at me and stop your complaining. And if God would have his face about 400,000 miles wide saying that, you can see this great big mouth in the sky, we'd probably believe him. But he's already said it right here. Hasn't he? Why are we griping and complaining? Is anybody griping and complaining this week? Stop that. That's all I know to say. Quit that. Well, we get over to, let me go on further. I'm not finished with Amalek. Let's start back down here in 17th chapter and verse 8. The 17th chapter has the first rock experience, and the Amalek experience. And the prophecy of Amalek was believed to be a descendant of Esau. Some people say there was a group of Amalekites here before Esau. That is another speculation. It depends on which historian you're reading. Don't say, I found something in history that contradicted Jim Brown. Everybody can find a historian that'll contradict another historian. When you read McClintock and Strong, it will say, you'll be reading some article, it'll say, Movers says this means so-and-so. Movers was a historian. And then it would say, unlike Philo, Josephus says, well, it just depends on which historian you're reading and what you trust. And I don't trust the historians. I trust the Bible, and that's my final authority. And a lot of times you can only find something to a degree and get an approximation on something. Don't sit around and argue about it. I proved Jim Brown wrong. I found a historian that disagreed with his historian. Oh, well, okay. I found a verse in the Bible that disagrees with your verse. I found a verse that proves free will, so you got to throw away Romans 8 and Romans 9. That's what people say. Well, I found a verse that proves that wrong over there. You can't do that. They have to blend together. Then came Amalek. In verse 8 of chapter 17, Amalek was the first nation to attack Israel when they came into the peninsula, Sinai Peninsula. And it's believed the Amalekites, if this is Israel here, if this is Israel, here's Israel. And here's Egypt. And here's the Dead Sea. And here's the Red Sea. The writers tell us that Amalek was somewhere between the Black Sea, or the Dead Sea, and the Red Sea. So probably somewhere in this area here. And they were supposed to be descendants of Esau, which was in this area right here, or called Edom, right there just below Israel, below the Dead Sea. You can look at Amalek in your McClintock and Strong, read Amalekites. The Amalekites were the enemies of God, and they were the first people to attack Israel. Now, I want us to look at some of the things about the Amalekites, because God killed the Amalekites, and he caused the Amalekites to kill some of Israel. Huh? That doesn't quite make sense, does it? Anytime people die, who holds the keys of death and hell? Look, let's just read it without you believing me. Go over here to Revelation, the first chapter. Revelation 1. Revelation 1. Everything in the Bible goes together and it blends together. You can't separate Revelation from Exodus. In fact, you absolutely can't separate it. You got the candlesticks being created, the 7 candlesticks being created in Exodus 25th chapter, and you got the 7 candlesticks in the first chapter of Revelation, don't you? You got the brazen sea, or the glassy sea, in the 4th chapter of Revelation, and you got Moses commanding the women to bring their looking glasses in 2 Samuel, in the Exodus, the 38th chapter, verse 8, bring their looking glasses to make this glassy sea. You got 24 elders, and that was out of the First Chronicles, the 24th chapter, where the 24 sons of Aaron's 2 sons, Eleazar and Ithamar, they were the 24 elders. The book of Revelation is Jewish. Now, where was I going? One. Revelation 1? I was going to give you something. What was it?
Jesus has the keys to hell.
Oh, Jesus has the keys. That's right. Now look here Jesus is standing amidst the candlesticks, and he speaks in verse 11. Verse 12, I saw the golden candlesticks, and he's in the middle of them in verse 13. He's got 7 stars in his right hand. In verse 16, and in verse 17, when I saw him, I fell down at his feet as dead, and you only give homage to a God. And he laid his right hand upon me, saying, Fear not, I am the first and the last. That's Jesus. He says at other times, I'm the Alpha and Omega. The Alpha is the first letter of the Greek alphabet. The Omega is the last letter. I am he that liveth and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. Amen. And I have the keys of death and hell. If men go to hell, I open the door to hell and put them in it. If men die, I have the keys of death, not Satan. Now, let's go back over here to... So if men die, and if men are killed, God has arranged the minds of evil men to kill people. God arranged the minds of Herod, Pilate, there in Acts 4, 27 and 28. Herod and Pilate and the Gentiles were there that day, the Roman soldiers. And the Jews were screaming, "Crucify him." And Jesus was arranging the murder of an innocent man. God was arranging the murder of an innocent man. And Jesus was innocent. He was God in the flesh. He had never committed any crime or any sin. And they were killing innocents, and they were guilty of murder. And they were therefore to do whatsoever thy hand and thy counsel determined before to be done. Determined before, prohorizo is the word predestinate. God predestinated the murder. The fact that he created the murder of Jesus, well, is there any great thing that he creates the murder of many other men? It wouldn't be nearly as evil to murder guilty men that it would be to murder an innocent man who was God. Now, go back to verse 8 of chapter 17. Then came Amalek and fought with Israel in Rephidim. And Moses said unto Joshua, "Choose us out men, and go out and fight with Amalek. And tomorrow I'll stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in mine hand." And he raises the rod up, and as long as Hur and Joshua hold his hands up, they keep winning the battle. Now, if God has arranged everything, did he arrange for Amalek to attack Israel? Well, yeah. God wants to destroy Amalek. I want us to go over here to let's go over here to the 14th chapter of Numbers. And I want to show you Amalek attacks Israel, and God lets them kill Israelites. Amalek is an interesting story. Look here in Numbers 14. Numbers 14. Now this is the adventures of Moses in the wilderness. That's what it is. Numbers 14. And look here in verse 30. Well, we need to back up, for goodness sakes. Look at, before we go any further, let's look over here. He's talking to the Israelites, saying, "You've transgressed against God." And Moses said, "Wherefore now do you transgress the commandment of the Lord? It shall not prosper." What happens in the 13th chapter, God tells them to go up to the land of Anak, which is also the land of what we call the land of the Gaza Strip. And that's also called the old land of the Philistines in the ancient world. And it's also the land of Anak, where we find the Anakims, Anakims, and those are giants. They are real tall men. And let me remind you, God did not call Goliath a giant. He called Goliath the champion of the Philistines. Didn't call him a giant. But in all probability, the Anakims were probably ancestors of Goliath, because Goliath was from Gath, and that's one of the northern cities of the Philistines. So if the land of Anak, or the Anakims, when they came here to Kadesh Barnea, and they've left the mountain of God, and they're coming up here to Kadesh Barnea, and God sends them in to spy out the land. They're rebelling against God, saying there's too many, and these guys are too big for us, and we can't possibly conquer them. But they have forgotten that when they came across the Red Sea, that God destroyed the greatest army in the world of the day. God doesn't need great armies. He has got an armory that's full of lightning bolts, earthquakes, volcanoes, fire from heaven. What does he need with a great army to destroy a bunch of tall guys about 9'6"? I mean, do you think a some volcano spewing out some ash that's 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, can it hurt a guy that's 9'6"? Well, I guess it can destroy him, can it? So whenever God gets ready to attack people, he don't fight like we fight. He's not Mike Tyson. I mean, Mike Tyson, when he was young, if he hit any man in the world, he's going to knock him out. Well, this is not Mike Tyson. This is the living God. He's going to knock out a whole bunch of men all at once. He had a death angel, Michael, who went down into the camp of the Assyrians and killed 185,000 of them in one night. That's better than karate, isn't it? I guess it is. Now, all right, in this 14th chapter, chapter 14, when you get down to Moses is talking to the people after their rebellion in the 13th chapter, Moses said in verse 41, "Wherefore now do you transgress the commandment of the Lord, but it shall not prosper. Don't go up. The Lord is not with you, Israel." They said, "Okay, now since you said you're going to destroy us, we've decided to go up. You've said that only Joshua and Caleb are going to enter the promised land, and we don't get to enter the promised land, so we've decided to go along with you, God." God says, "I'm not on your side anymore. You don't understand. Don't go up and try to destroy the Anakims. Don't go in." They've already gone into the land in the 13th chapter. And God says, "Go not up, for the Lord is not with you, that ye be not smitten before your enemies." If you go, I've already told you, don't go. "We're going anyway, God, because you said we'd be okay, and we want the promised land." He says, "You're not going to get it." Remember last week we talked about Moses in that 20th chapter of Numbers, and God told Moses to speak to the rock, and Moses hit the rock twice with the rod. And God said, "Just for that you rebelled against me, Moses? Just because you're mad at the people, you go against my commandment?" He says, "You're not entering the promised land for that." And Moses in that 3rd chapter of Deuteronomy is begging the Lord, please, Lord, let me enter the promised land." And God says, "Don't you talk to me about that again. You're not going." And and Joshua's telling the people here, you tell the people they're not going, these that have rebelled. "Oh, okay, we'll go. We decided we'll go fight the Anakims rather than lose the promised land." And this is his reply to them: "Go not up, the Lord is not with you, Israel, that you be not smitten with your enemies, for the Amalekites." God is going to have the Amalekites strike Israel and kill them. "For the Amalekites and the Canaanites are there before you, and you're going to fall by their swords, because you're turned away from the Lord, and therefore the Lord will not be with you, Israel." Boy, that has got to be a sad thing, isn't it? "But they presumed to go up to the hilltop. Nevertheless, the ark of the covenant of the Lord and Moses departed not out of the camp." Wherever the ark of the covenant went, that was where God was with them. And God says, "Joshua, Moses, don't you let that ark go with them." Wherever the ark was, there was going to be a victory for Israel. "Then the Amalekites came down, and the Canaanites which dwelt in the hill, and they smote Israel, discomfited," or made them uncomfortable, "even unto Hormah, and they were killing the children of Israel." Now, who ordained that? Who ordained all of this to be the way it is? God is ordaining everything. In fact, if you back up, let's back up to the 13th chapter and read some of this. We'll be going back through it, but I want you to see some of these things. In this 13th chapter, look at verse 1. "The Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Send thou men that they may search the land of Canaan, which I give unto the children of Israel, and of every tribe of their fathers shall ye send a man, every one a ruler among them. And Moses, by the commandment of the Lord, sent them from the wilderness of Paran. All these men were heads of the children of Israel," and he gives the names of them. And if you'll notice, in verse 6, he's telling you of the tribe of Reuben, Shammua, the king of Zachar; of the tribe of Simeon, Shaphat, the son of Hori. And look at verse 6. Of the tribe of Judah, Caleb. Now Caleb's going into the land of Anak, the son of Jephunneh. And then when you look at verse 8, and of the tribe of Ephraim, Hoshea, the son of Nun. Hoshea was another name for Joshua. So Joshua and Caleb, that's very important. He's got a man out of each tribe. But Joshua and Caleb are the only two of these men, and of all the people that are behind these other men, that God's going to allow to go into the land of Canaan some years later. And he sends them into the land. They spy out the land. And look down here in verse 26. And they went and came to Moses and Aaron and to all... Well, let me back up a little. Let's back up to... And they went up and searched the land in verse 21. They ascended, verse 22, by the south and came unto Hebron, which is the southernmost city at that time in Israel. And Talmi, the children of Anak... Now Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. And they came unto the brook of Eshcol and cut down from thence a branch with one cluster of grapes, and they bury it between two upon a staff. That's how rich this land was. It was a land flowing with milk and honey. The udders of the goats were distended, and the milk would just drip out because the land was so rich. And the grapes and the figs would drip to the ground, and honey was in all the rocks. It was literally a land flowing milk and honey. And they brought of the pomegranate and the figs. And look at verse 25. They returned from searching the land after 40 days. That's very significant. 40 days. And they went and came to Moses and Aaron and to the congregation of the children of Israel unto the wilderness of Paran, to Kadesh, which was just south of Israel in the desert, and brought back word unto Moses and Aaron, and unto all the congregation, and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him and said, We came into the land whither thou sentest us, and surely it floweth with milk and honey, and this is the fruit of it. It takes 2 men to carry one of these stalks of grapes. Nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land, and the cities are walled and very great, and moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. They're big. They scare us. Moses, Aaron. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and by the coast of Jordan. And Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, Let us go up at once and possess it. Caleb's ready to go. He believes God. He believes they can win. For we are well able to overcome them. You see, if you believe God, you can go against your enemy one way and they'll flee 7 ways, and Caleb believed that. It's a good name to name your son. But the men that went up with him said, We be not able to go up against the people, for they're stronger than us. You mean God destroyed here in the 14th chapter, he destroyed the army of Pharaoh, and you think he can't take care of these Anakims? They brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, The land which we have gone to search, the land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof, they'll destroy us, and all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature, and they're too much for us. And yet God has... Boy, how quickly does believers forget what God has done, huh? How quickly do we forget? And there they saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our sight as grasshoppers when we stood beside them, and so we were in their sight like little bitty bugs. And they're too much for us. And the children of Israel murmured against Moses in chapter 14, verse 2. And wherefore hath the Lord brought us into the land to fall by the sword, verse 3, that our wives and children could be a prey? Were it not better for us to return to Egypt? Moses, you brought us out here to die. You mean he has destroyed Pharaoh's armies? Thousands of chariots? And you think God can't take care of this situation in your life? It's too big for God. And I understand these things in the Bible, but my situation is such it can't be fixed. Has anybody thought that before? Yeah, we've all. Have you ever had to face an entire army and you're up against the sea and there's no way out and there's this gigantic army coming right in behind you, and then all of a sudden God throws a fiery wall there and they can't get to you? They said one to another, "Let us make a captain and return to Egypt." So we'll do. And Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel, and Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, which were of them that searched the land, rent their clothes, and they mourned over Israel not having the guts to go in. And the only two of these men that's going to enter into Canaan 40 years later. What did we say? 40 days they went up to spy the land, and God says, every day, a year for a day, you're going to have to wander the land till I kill off all these unbelievers. Reminds us of Hebrews, the 3rd chapter. Why did they not enter into God's rest, God's spiritual Sabbath? Because of unbelief in the wilderness. These are the days of Israel's provoking God. They spake unto all the company of the children of Israel, saying, the land which we passed through to search it is an exceeding good land. This is Joshua and Caleb. Joshua leads the children of Israel into the land. Moses dies on the eastern side of the Jordan River. He's taken up into Mount Pisgah's lofty heights, and he gets to view the land. And the only two of the rebellious people that get to go in the land is Joshua and Caleb. And who is the first judge after Joshua dies? Caleb's nephew. And if the Lord delight in us, he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which floweth with milk and honey. Only rebel not against God, children of Israel. Neither fear ye the people of the land, for they are bread for us. We're going to eat them alive because we have a God. Their defense is departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Fear them not. We fear the world, don't we? We're afraid of what they're going to do to us, what they're going to keep us from. Oh, goodness, how can I witness to people? Tell them the truth, and you'll destroy them with the truth, and they'll pull away from you. For all the congregation bade stone them with stones. All the congregation of Israel wants to kill Caleb and Joshua. And the glory of the Lord appeared unto the tabernacle of the congregation before all the children of Israel. And the Lord said unto Moses, how long will this people provoke me? Turn over to Hebrews. We'll come back to that verse. Remember, we taught on the spiritual Sabbath over here. These are called the days of provocation. It's the days when Israel provoked God. Hebrews, 3rd chapter. I wish I had 12 hours to teach on this, or 15 hours. And he says here in chapter 3, verse 8, harden not your hearts as in the provocation. That's what he said. They're provoking me. This is God. They're provoking God. They're angry at God. They're angry at Moses. They're certainly angry at Joshua and Caleb. They're going to kill them. In the day of temptation in the wilderness. Your fathers tempted me and proved me, and I saw my works 40 years, and I killed off everybody that was 20 years old and older. That was military age. Everybody, they're going to have to wander in the wilderness. They have to wander in this wilderness for 40 years so God can kill everybody from 20 years old and older except Caleb and Joshua. And Moses is not going either. Moses is not going over. Not over. And Moses is going to weep and cry before the Lord, please God, let me go. He said, no, don't you talk back to me anymore. I told you no. You can read that in the 3rd chapter of Deuteronomy. Who do you think this God is? He's Jesus before he's called Jesus. People say, Jesus is this nice little pansy God, and he just likes everybody. This is the Jesus of the Bible, and the only reason he didn't come like this, and like he's coming back the second time in Revelation the 19th chapter with eyes as a flame of fire, upon a white horse, with a sword coming from his mouth, and that's the word of God, quick and powerful, sharper than any two-edged sword. The only reason he didn't come like that when he came in the manger in Bethlehem, the only reason he didn't come killing unbelievers is because he came to die for his wife. He came to submit himself and acquiesce to the death of these murderers. But he says, watch what I can do. I'll prove to you I'm God. I'll stand up on my feet after you kill me. I'll resurrect myself. And then I'll show you who God is. That is the greatest miracle of all miracles. Kill a God, and he'll stand up. Now, where was I? And the Lord said unto Moses, how long will this people provoke me? Those were the days of provocation. He said they couldn't enter into my rest because of their unbelief. So God's going to kill everybody 20 years old and upward, because that's military age, and everybody murmured against Joshua and Caleb except everybody murmured against them, said let's kill them, and of course Moses and Aaron's not murmuring against them. They want to kill Joshua and Caleb because they went over there with them. Remember that list? They went with them. How long, said Moses, how long will this people provoke me? How long will it be ere they believe me and all the signs which I have showed among them? What do you people want? I have brought 10 plagues upon Pharaoh. I've softened his heart. I've hardened his heart. I brought you to the Red Sea. I gave you manna from heaven. You went out there and said, what is it? God said, that's what we'll call it. What is it? Manna, mon, means what is it? That's what it means. Mon. I'm just going to make this all real simple. You call it, what is it? That's what I'm going to call it. And Moses, I will smite them with pestilence and disinherit them and make of thee a greater nation and mightier than they. And people say, well, then why did Moses ask God not to do it? God ordained Moses' prayer too, didn't he? Everything here has been ordained by God. And Moses said unto the Lord, then the Egyptians shall hear it, for thou broughtest up this people in thy might from among them, and they will tell it to the inhabitants of the land, for they have heard that thou, Lord, art among this people, that thou, Lord, hast seen face to face, and that the cloud standeth over them. That's the cloud by day and a fire by night, and that thou goest before them by the daytime in a pillar of a cloud and a pillar of fire by night. If you kill them all, Lord, as one man, then the nations who have heard will speak and say, because the Lord was not able to bring his people into the land which he sware, therefore he has slain them in the wilderness. And that's Moses' prayer, and God ordained that too. And then he goes on down here. But notice this. Let's just read this. And now I beseech thee, let the power of my Lord be great according to thou hast spoken, saying, the Lord is long-suffering, of great mercy, forgiving in iniquity and transgression, and by no means clearing the guilty. The guilty are not going to be cleared in this. The guilty are going to die. He says, I'm going to put you in the wilderness for 40 years, a year for every day. You spite out the land, and I'm going to kill off all the unbelief in Israel. When they got to the Jordan River in Deuteronomy, all of Israel was clean. There's the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River. They're going to cross the Jordan River after 40 years in the wilderness. Israel is all believers when they cross the Jordan River. It's only after they get into the land there in the book of Judges and Joshua dies and a new generation rises up that doesn't know Jehovah, they go after Baal in the grove. What do you say? What's wrong with Israel? I don't know. What's wrong with America? What's wrong with the so-called churches in America? Same thing. No, I'm not going to clear the guilty. I'm going to kill them. Okay, you satisfied, Moses? Visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation. People have asked me, well, will iniquity be visited from a man to his children? Yes. Will the penalty for sin be visited? No. Every man's going to suffer for his own sin. When the Bible says over there in Exodus, let's look at that. In Exodus, back up to Exodus. Exodus 20. There's so much to this Old Testament. I wish I could get out of my mouth all of it, I'm thinking. Exodus 20. In verse 5, thou shalt not bow down thyself unto these idol gods, nor serve them, for I am the Lord thy God, I am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children of the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. Those that don't believe me hate me. I'll visit the sin. If you smoke and cuss, you think your kid's not going to drink and take drugs? They'll say, my mom and dad does their sin, and here's my choice of sin. But they won't suffer for your sins. It'll be visited on them because of the way you live, and they will suffer because of the sin they commit. It won't be your sins. You'll teach them to sin by example. If you do something, if you cuss, don't expect your kids not to cuss. That's very hypocritical. You cuss a blue streak and say, don't you say that nasty word. That is hypocrisy. Just look at him and say, I expect that. I'm sorry. I've told many families, when you've lived in your sin, and who here hasn't lived in their sin? Raise your hand. Hasn't lived in your Yeah, hasn't. Who hasn't lived in your sin? Okay, since you've lived in your sin, and you have children, and you realize that they've seen you. Let me tell you something. You know who knows you better than anybody else? The people in your household. Your wife, your husband, your kids. They know you're a sinner. Go ahead and sit them down at the kitchen table and say, I've been a sinner. I'm sorry the way I've lived in front of you. They know that, and they'll respect you more for that than for pretending that you hadn't been a sinner, because they know it. They've watched you and heard you. I had to sit Eric down one time when he was 14. I had been treating him rough. I told my sister, she came through town, I said, I think I've been too hard on Eric. She said, won't you apologize to him? I thought, whoa, wait a minute. I'm the adult. He's the kid. And I thought, if I apologize, I'll say, I'm sorry. He'd say, we should be. But I set him down the den. I said, Eric, I'm sorry. I've treated you pretty hard. God was really dealing with my heart. And he didn't say you should be. He said, I'm sorry too. And that touched my heart. Your kids are going to know. Don't you know that? They already know your sin. If you've never apologized to them, they think you're being hypocritical. Don't you know that? Goodness. I think it should be a common practice. I have apologized to Eric more times than I can even name since he was 14. I didn't say it one time. I'll say it now once in a while. I'll say, Eric, I'm really sorry for what I did when you were younger. And Moses and Aaron fell on their faces. Where was I? Huh? All right. How long? In 25? 20 verse 5. 22. Exodus 20. Oh, that's right. Yeah, we got to look at this, because he says the same thing over here when he says, I'll visit iniquity to the third and the fourth generation in verse 18 of chapter 14 of Numbers. Well, he says here in Exodus 20 and verse 5, I'll visit the iniquity of the third and fourth generation. There's something called original sin. Original sin does not mean Adam was the first man that sinned. The doctrine of original sin is a Roman Catholic doctrine. And they got it from paganism. And that is that the penalty for sin is passed to the children. And the Bible says that's not true. Man's sin, when you sin in front of your children, you'll pass sin to them, and they'll have to pay the penalty for their own sin. That's what this is talking about. If you cuss, your kids will cuss. If you drink, your kids will smoke pot. And if you cuss, you're going to cause other Christians say, well, he cusses or she cusses, so I get to cuss. People are going to follow your example. Well, Jim, did you used to cuss like a sailor? I don't do that no more. I'm not going to do that. What we're supposed to be living an example, a Christ-like example in front of the world. I know not just one or two people here are guilty. I know that. Your eyes go. Now, look at this in Deuteronomy. Go to Deuteronomy 24. This has to be a balance. You have to understand this. Deuteronomy 24, verse 16. The fathers shall not be put to death for the children, neither shall the children be put to death for the fathers. Every man shall be put to death for his own sin. You'll pass the sin by example down to your children. But they'll suffer the penalty for their own sin. They won't suffer the penalty. The doctrine of original sin is Roman Catholic. All of you that have been Roman Catholic, you know that. Because as soon as a baby is born, you have to rush it to the priest real quick and get it sprinkled before it dies, because if you don't, it'll become a gnome, a demon, dwell somewhere between heaven and earth, and it'll devour the babies that are Christians. Now, that's an old, ancient, pagan thing, and the Roman Catholics adopted it. So they got to run to a priest real quick. You're during the middle of the day, right? Get them sprinkled so you can wash away the original penalty for sin. That's called original sin. The Bible doesn't teach that. You will pass your example to your children and to the people around you. If you think it's okay for you to do something, other Christians will say, well, he says it's okay to drink. I've had people here argue with me about drinking. If you think that you can drink a beer while I'm sitting at the table in a restaurant with you, you're really mistaken. I won't chew you out. I'll just say, excuse me. I'll pick my plate up and move to another table. First of all, it is drinking, cussing, and all these things. They are a picture of sin in our society, aren't they? Abstain from appearances of evil. Not just evil, but things that appear to be evil. We're not supposed to be talking like that and living that way and looking that way. We're called to live godly and righteously and holy. We've been predestined to conform to the likeness of Christ, haven't we? We're chosen to be holy and without blame before Him in agape, walking in His commandments. I know it's hard for people who are not used to this. And don't say, well, damn is a word in the Bible. Every cuss word is in the Bible. I was working out at a gym when I was 60. I thought I could start working out again, and I strained my shoulder, and I had to have an operation on it. And a guy walked up to me and said, he used the S word. Is that in the Bible? I said, that's a real good word, Eric. I said, that's over there in the 3rd chapter of Philippians, when Paul said, he said, I was a Pharisee of the Pharisees, and he said, I was circumcised the 8th day of Israel. I'm of the tribe of Benjamin. He said, I had all of these accolades in my life, and he said, I count them all but dung, that I might gain Christ. He's standing in the middle of this gym, this great big muscular guy. Is S in the Bible? I said, that's a good word. And I said, Paul said, I count them all but dung. I said, the word is skubalon. That's the word you're looking for. I said, if you get any more of those words, bring them back to me. I'll tell you about them. Okay? And you know what he did? He just went. He wasn't expecting that. And every time he'd walk by me after that, he'd go, hi, Jim. I'd say, hey, Eric, how you doing? You didn't have to chew him out. Just define the word. Every cuss word's in the Bible. Don't come up and say it's in the Bible. Well, certainly it is. But that's an appearance of evil in our day and time, isn't it? And that makes people think, well, he talks about being a Christian. He talks about predestination, all that stuff he believes. But he cusses too. Do you know that? I remember this lady in real estate. And she was real gentle and sweet and quiet and just very gentle and loving and seemed like a Christian. And I heard her blurt out just real loud the S word one time. Do you know, every time I see her, think of her, that's all I can picture. You'll remember the worst, and guess what? Somebody will remember the worst thing they ever heard you say or saw you do. They won't remember all that other good stuff you did. Now, where was I? Well, in fact, if you go to Ezekiel 18, and this is, a lot of people say, people believe babies go to hell. We don't believe babies go to hell here. Babies would have to sin. They have to know right from wrong, good from evil. You're not born a sinner. You're born with a sin nature, and you have to come to the point of knowing right from wrong, good from evil. Now, I'm not saying a 6-year-old can't die and go to hell. I'm saying a baby 6 weeks old cannot go to hell. First of all, it has to sin. If God sends anybody to hell that has not sinned, then he is an unjust God. And I've had people get mad at me that were associated with Grace and Truth Ministry, didn't like it because I wouldn't put babies in hell. That is ignorant. God has to stay true to every one of his laws. If a baby dies before it comes to an accountable age, it has to be elect. That's an absolute fact. Now, where was I going? Ezekiel 18. Let me go here to Ezekiel 18. Ezekiel 18. And look here in verse 20. Verse 20. The soul that sinneth, it shall die. The son shall not bear the iniquity of the father, neither shall the father bear the iniquity of the son. However, the father will teach the iniquity to the son by example. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon him, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon him. And you got all kinds of verses in the Scripture. Job 19:4, 2 Kings 14:6, Proverbs 9:12, Jeremiah 31:30. All of these say a man has to suffer for his own sin. You don't suffer for the sins of your father. And original sin, the doctrine of original sin is paganism. Yes, Adam was the first man that sinned, but that's not what it's talking about. The Bible says babies are innocent. The Bible says in Jeremiah the 19th chapter that they went into Tophet and offered the blood of their innocence. That's what Israel did. The word innocent is the word naki. It means all charges are dropped to the ground. They are guiltless. They have no guilt. And they offered their firstborn sons in the valley of Tophet to Moloch. That's what Israel did. Killed them. Now, go back over here to Numbers, the 14th chapter. How much time do I have, Mike? All right. The Lord is long-suffering, there in verse 18, forgiving iniquity and transgression, by no means clearing the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children of the third and fourth generation. And he says, I love verse 21, but as truly as I live, all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord. That's a prophecy of the Gentiles, isn't it? The earth shall be full of his knowledge and glory as waters that cover the sea. That's over there in Habakkuk, the 2nd chapter. That's when God calls his Gentiles to the light, his predestinated elect Gentile family. Because all those men which have seen my glory and my miracles which I did in Egypt, this is all about rebellion against God. You think God still doesn't look on rebellion with disdain? You think you can get by? Israel said, he doth not see, he doth not know. God can't see what I'm doing. I'm so insignificant. No one in here is so insignificant that God can't see your sin. And he'll hold us accountable. And he'll deal with us until we learn to live righteously. And Israel was one of the worst examples of murmuring and complaining and griping and cursing God and cursing Moses and cursing Joshua and Caleb. Surely they shall not see the land which I swear unto the fathers, neither shall any of them that provoke me see it, but my servant Caleb, because he hath another spirit with him, shall have followed me fully, him will I bring into the land. Caleb's going in. Wherein he went, and his seed shall possess it. Now the Amalekites and the Canaanites dwelt in the land. Tomorrow turn you and get you into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea. And he goes on down here talking about how long will I bear the murmurings of Israel? In verse 30. He says in verse 29, your carcasses shall fall in the wilderness. I'm going to keep you in the desert for 40 years. All were numbered of you according to your whole number from 20 years old and upward. At the time you went in and looked at the land of Anak, I'm going to kill everybody except Caleb and Joshua. Even Moses is not going in. Well, if you had somebody 18 years old at this time, they're not 20, and they lived and they were 40 years in the wilderness, how old are they going to be? They're going to be 58. At this time, if they're 18, when they get there, if they're 10, they're going to be 50. So God's going to have a lot of middle-aged people there to go into the land, isn't he? And most of Israel is going to be born in the wilderness. They're not all Israel which are of Israel. God's election hath obtained this for us, and the rest are blinded. Then he says, doubtless ye shall not come into the land. This is a sad pronunciation against them. You're not coming into the land concerning which I swear to you that dwell therein, save Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Joshua the son of Nun. That's all that's going in. That's 20 years old and upward. Everybody else is going to die. You provoke me. You provoke my wrath. But your little ones, which ye said should be afraid, them will I bring in. You got some 5-year-olds, that'll be 45 when they get there. You got some 3 years old, it'll be 43 when they get to the land, which ye have despised. And as for you, your carcasses shall fall in the wilderness. And God said they didn't enter in because of unbelief. And if they had rested in the things of God, they would have entered into his spiritual Sabbath, wouldn't he? God says, I'm going to do this in your life, and if you can rest in it. But if you want to fight God and go out in the world, you know what God will do? He'll kill that old man. Remember, you got an inner man and outer man? You got Christ in you, and he'll kill off in this wilderness that we're in. You remember, 4 was the number of the judgments of God. God will put you through the sword, the famine, the pestilence, and the beast of this world, and he'll get rid of self. It might take him 40 years to do it, but he'll get rid of you. And he's going to get rid of all this unbelief in Israel, except Joshua and Caleb. Your little ones will come in. As for you, your carcasses will fall in the wilderness, and your children shall wander in the wilderness 40 years, and bear your whoredoms until your carcasses be wasted in the wilderness. After the number of days in which you search the land, even 40 days, each day for a year. I've said that many times, haven't I? Shall ye bear your iniquities even 40 years, and ye shall know that my breach of promise. And the Lord said, I will surely do it unto all this evil congregation of Israel. I'm going to kill off everyone in Israel that's 20 or over. And the only people that entered the land was Caleb and Joshua and a bunch of teenagers and kids that came out of this episode. That's amazing, isn't it? So God's going to get rid of the old man that don't believe God as you go through this wilderness. You say, Jim, I don't want to live like you. I didn't want to live like me either 35 years ago. If I'd have run across me, I'd have thought, this guy's a wacko. He's nuts. You don't want to live in my house or live around me. I'll correct you every time you let out a cuss word. So what are you doing? I've had people let out cuss words on the parking lot here in front of me. I go, what are you doing? That's a cuss word where I come from. We just in there talking about holy and godly living, and you're out here on the parking lot cussing? What's wrong with you? They say, oh, I'm sorry, Jim. I say, okay, Don't do it anymore. I don't write them from now on. I just say, don't do that. Don't just not do it around me. Don't do it around anybody. It's not a sign of holiness, is it? It's certainly not a fruit of the Spirit. The Lord said, I will surely do it to this evil congregation that are gathered together against me in this wilderness. They shall be consumed, and they're going to die. I'm going to kill them all except for Joshua and Caleb and all these kids. And that's what happened. So when they get to Canaan's land, only these young people and Joshua and Caleb are there. Caleb, that's a good name. I like that. Caleb. And the men with Moses sent to search the land, who returned and made all the congregation to murmur against him by bringing up slander upon the land. Even these men that did bring up the evil report upon the land died by the plague before the Lord. And Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, which were of the men that went to search the land, lived still. Moses told these things unto all the children of Israel, and the people mourned greatly. And then they said, Lo, we're here. We'll go up to the place which the Lord has promised, for we have sinned. Well, gosh, I guess you'd say that after all this depression that Moses says he's going to kill all of you. Okay, we'll go up now. Well, I guess you will. God says he's going to kill you. You don't get to go up. He says, don't go. Oh, yeah, but we're going to go. And God says, if you go, I'm not with you. Look here in Joshua. Look in Judges. Go to Judges. It's not Moses that leads them into the land. It's Joshua, Moses' chief lieutenant. It's his second in command. It's his brigadier general or his lieutenant general. Moses was a 5-star general. And over here in Judges, the man that leads them in is Joshua. So when you get over here to Joshua, Judges, I'll get it in a minute. Judges. Go to Judges. Look here. Now just look at this. I want you to see this. They're in the land. They're going to possess the land in the first chapter of Judges. They go into the land. Joshua leads them in verse 1 of Judges. Now after the death of Joshua, they're coming into the land. And then you look over here in chapter 2, or chapter 2, in verse 8, and Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died, being 110 years old. So he's in the land, isn't he? And he dies there. And then you get over here in chapter 3, and God tells Israel, I'm going to prove you, and I'm going to turn you over to all of these lords of the Philistines and the Canaanites in verse 3, and I'm going to teach you to war because you didn't drive the people out of the land, all these pagans. And he says, Israel took their daughters to be their wives in verse 6, gave their daughters to be their sons, and served their gods. And they went after Baal in the grove. And God says, I've got to send you a judge. Therefore the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he sold them into the hand of Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia. And the children of Israel served Cushan-Rishathaim 8 years. And when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord raised up a deliverer to the children of Israel, who delivered them, even Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. So the first judge of Israel was Othniel, a nephew of Caleb. The only other older man was allowed to come into Israel. So Caleb comes in, and the first judge is his nephew. That's the first judge in Israel. He turns them over to judges all through this because they refused to drive the people out, all these pagans out of the land. He says, I'm going to teach you to war with these people. And every time, as soon as Othniel died, they go right back to Baal in the grove, and then he says, and they cried, oh God, give us a deliverer. And he says, I'll send you a left-handed man. I know you think left-handed people are evil. Well, here's Ehud. He delivers them, and then he dies, and they go after Baal in the grove. He says, I'll send you Shamgar. As soon as he dies, they go back after Baal in the grove. He dies, and he sends them a woman. He says, you don't like women to lead you? I'm going to send you Deborah. She's going to be your judge. Well, women are evil. They don't have good sense. That's what Israel said. God says, you'll follow her. And she dies, and they go back after Baal and the Grove. And he sends Gideon. Gideon wipes the land clean of Baal and Grove worship. Destroys it all. They go to Gideon's house and tells Joash, his father, bring out Gideon. We want to kill him. And Joash says, well, I understand that your God is a God, your Baal is a God. Won't you let Baal kill him? That's a funny insult in the Bible. I like Gideon's father. And as soon as Gideon dies, they go back after Baal in the Grove. And Gideon's son Ahimelech rises up, and he's a jerk. And they keep going after Baal in the Grove, and you wonder, what in the world's wrong with Israel? I don't know. I can't figure it out. What's wrong with this nation that calls itself a Christian nation, and they got churches on every corner, and none of them believe the truth. They don't believe predestination, daily cross, death, self. Israel's not any different than the so-called church in America. Are they? That's something else, isn't it? I hope you can start getting the picture. I'm painting the picture of the Old Testament to you. I'm going to work our way through the book of Exodus, and as we hit these characters in these places, you'll know what it's about when we hit it. Okay? I used to think, well, if I teach Old Testament, everybody will get bored and they'll get lost in it. I want you to see the judgment of God was on Israel, and the judgment of God will be on our lives individually if we rebel against God. We need to learn to clean our lives up and shut our mouths and not be like Israel, but it seems like America has the so-called Christians in America have a hard time doing that, don't they? Let's pray. Father, thank you for truth. God, I get real depressed over the preachers in this nation. Give me strength to keep going. Lord, I pray for the church. You'll build them up. Cause them to stand in truth. Lord, I pray you'll increase the faith of the flock. Lord, it takes a lot to do that. Cause them to commit to you. Let them see in their lives when they rebel against God, it's the same thing as it was with Israel. You'll kill off that old man, that outer man, and it won't be fun, Lord. And that's what you're doing with people here tonight and all through their lives, and they wonder what's going on, and it's just you. Deal with our hearts. Lead us to your elect. And Lord, I pray that you'll open up doors for the ministry. Let us teach this message throughout the world, and we'll give you praise for everything. In Christ's name, amen.